Test, 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 test. All right, looks like audio is working. Video is working. We got about 10 minutes to class. So if you're joining class now, okay. Start with welcome to class. Long time no see. Spotlight me. Boom, 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 boom. I think this is the longest I've had a cup of coffee last my classes ever. Of course, it's my third cup of coffee today, but it's the first cup of coffee I've had while here. Started drinking at 9 this morning. It's still around. That's not coming. Ooh. Maybe I got my proper amount of caffeine in and I can actually be effective. I don't know. I think that's a tall order right there. All right. So we've been talking about surveys. Surveys. Concepts. Language. I didn't do that. That was not me. What's that? A remote? Go get what about surveys? Or me. Bum, bum, bum. Better. Kind of been on quantitative side. And then we'll move into the qualitative side a little bit today. How's life been? You good? Life been good for everybody online? Ooh, I don't have chat. Push that on in case you guys want to talk, but feel free to sound off. Boop. Third cup. Coffee. Excellent. Yeah. Anymore, I think I get more coffee than I do actual water. Like, that's probably not good. But I keep moving around a lot. That's something. At least I feel like it. Let's see. I was hoping to get a few hours last night to collapse down everybody's interests so I can come here and talk about that today, but I didn't get that time in just yet. So stay tuned. I'll get emails out to everyone in the next probably couple days or so about potential directions for research and that kind of stuff. So we'll finish out the talk about quantitative. We'll move into a little bit of qualitative stuff. I figure that'll always help with. Actually, what it helps with is writing, reading, and deepening understanding. It's really what it is. It's that process. But we'll see how far we get. Survey stuff first. We talk about concepts, measures, the underlying math logic there. And so we'll also talk about one, that kind of stuff. Let's see here. Oh, it's 4. I just heard that thing beep at me. Maybe I'm hearing things. Let's see, what things did we not come off here? Oh, pardon me. Hmm. Ever talk about bias in here? Okay, good. I want to go back into that. Probably going to talk about it on the qualitative side though, 'cause it's a little bit different there. Not entirely different, but the amount that can come in there can be higher. One of those things we start dealing with numbers versus like quantitative versus qualitative. This one's got some opportunities there where numbers kind of make things a little bit more objective. This side's a little bit more subjective. So I need to have a conversation about that. Okay. Let's see, got 4 minutes. Do I want to down this into the water? I think I am. Yeah, it's like, do I want more caffeine as the class go? Or am I going to need water? Don't know.
I'm just saying, talking makes your mouth dry.
This is true.
Coffee makes your mouth dry. You might want some water while you're lecturing.
This is true. I'll be. All right, let's see. This. Stuff. Also talk about open-ended, closed-ended. Think of open-ended questions because it talks about that in the survey section. Think about those as almost like a segue between your quantitative stuff and your qualitative stuff. And so we'll start out with that. First, water on that.
Sitting.
I'm excited for the break.
Yeah.
We need food.
Yeah.
That's our.
That's going great. We've missed you here. Yes. It's just, I've been zooming in, trying to say yes. Smile. If I weren't already here on campus for my class before this one, I would have this one. You guys doing anything for Thanksgiving? I think so. I usually have like 2 or 3 Thanksgivings because I heard your worship.
Oh my goodness.
So like I go over here.
Yeah.
The fridge is filled with leftovers. Yeah. What about you? I'm doing Thanksgiving at home. My mom and my brother are gonna come up here, so
Oh,
we're just gonna have a small. Yeah. What about you?
I was just gonna go to my parents. Mhm.
Nice.
Nice little break from town hall.
Yeah. Just so excited for all the food. I'm like, I'm just so ready to eat all of it.
All right. So tell me what's going on in the world today. Going on in the world today? Your attention. Wow. I really don't know. I should know something. Exactly. Let's see. No, the only thing I can think of is I found out, was it last week? New members of the family have a whole, at least one aunt, maybe two, didn't know about before. Whoa, grandpa, bad guy. Yeah, I was like one of those like 23 in me though. That's how you found that. Crazy, crazy. It's people for you though. Let's see. We left off. We were talking about surveys. I was starting to show you guys some of the math involved and how that stuff works. So that's good enough for that for right now. So I'll show you how to start running those numbers with stuff for yourselves soon. I didn't get quite to compiling everybody's research interest yesterday that I thought I would. Life's so crazy and expected. But we'll talk about surveys, that kind of stuff. You can kind of see how the different ways we can do that. Then we'll move over to the other side of this. While this will teach you a little bit about, some of the underlying logic with the concepts that we use and those types of things, some of that math side of it. This is the one, the qualitative side, was where you start to get into more depth. And so that's where, in some ways, if you've done lit reviews before, you kind of started to engage in this in some very unique ways, because that's something that's already established. So you're going into it, you're reading and see if you pull out, right? But we'll talk more about that when we get to first. We'll pick up where we left off. And so, let's see, we talked about format, things that was good for, different types of data you can capture with it, the different survey types that already exist. In terms of methods, probably the most common anymore is what type? What kinds of surveys have you guys ever gotten? You're talking about some type of electronic, right? Realize you can conduct these any number of ways. Right? You can do this in person, you can do this through a computer, you can do this with a piece of paper, any number of ways. All that is really affected from it. Let's see, online, in person, in computer, paper, however. Those means there are a huge facet for dictating what kinds of topics you're going to be getting into, because of one thing. Like you're trying to get people, is it something where they're going to have access to computer and email address or something of that nature? Is it something you're going to be able to talk to people? And as you start to go talk to people and interact with them, the role that you have there starts to have a greater effect, right? So we talked a little bit about it in terms of way back here when we're getting into the measures for surveys. We identify what people mean in terms of those concepts. Then we identify, here's what they actually equate to if we're going to measure it, right? It's not just that we're caring about someone's socioeconomic status. What we really want to know is, what kind of career you have, what kind of money you make, what kind of life you're living, that kind of stuff, right? Because that's really what socioeconomic status is. Okay? So in identifying the concepts, we identify underlying things we're measuring, and then the math between them. Pretty easy. Can be difficult, but fairly easy. As we ask questions, though, we know that those questions, the formats, the words, the options we give, all have massive effects on the data that we get. So we want it to be the best way to collect the information without altering the data, right? So if you stop and think about, I'm gonna ask them about their fear levels, like what we were doing last time. Across all of those, I think you went with that 5-point scale. What it was positive over here, negative, I can't remember. 0. Right? By with 4-point, there is no 0. Right? And so just something as simple as that, you change the entire nature of it. So if someone actually has no fear here at all, no opinion one way or another, you have no way of collecting it. They have to make a decision here. Sometimes you want to do that, sometimes you don't, depending on what you're dealing with. And so you have to deal with what we're trying to measure, how we're trying to get it, what's the best way to do it, what's the most accurate. As we're deploying those types of things, even the online stuff, realize your own interactions there will always have an effect, right? One, say you, and ties back into the sampling stuff, right? You have identified your sample. To some degree, you got to get this into their hands or in front of their faces. So you're gonna have a contact with them of some kind, right? That first contact, that's gonna have an effect. What do they say about first impressions? Right? Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, okay, think about it this way. That first request you get for that survey or whatever it is, what's the likelihood you're going to complete it? That first contact's a huge aspect of it. But also realize it's like you can have multiple contacts. I can send reminders out for that kind of thing. Pretty easy. Some of these other formats, whether you're talking about paper, in person, email, not quite so easy to do that. Right? You'd send out a secondary, a follow-up, or reminder. Hey, we've not received your thing yet. Maybe in the mail kind of thing. Some of these takes a lot more effort. Right? Each of those contacts will have some type of an effect. That's not going to get better as you get more involved. Quantitative is all about the numbers. Qualitatives doesn't have anything to do with numbers. You put numbers to it. It doesn't have to be though. And so this one's a little bit different. And so talk about open questions, open-ended questions, or closed-ended questions, right? So tell me about the differences between those two things. Yeah. This one can lead more questions. But anytime you start dealing with open-ended stuff, you're think about it this way, like in terms of parameters, maybe would be a good way of thinking about it. When you have that closed-ended question, you set those parameters. Like these are the only responses you have available here. But this stuff you don't. And so the types of things that can come in really, really range. They can be it's like to talk about how all over the place they can be. They can be something that would help guide your research to something that has nothing to do with anything whatsoever, just random noise, right? And so as you set these up, you usually don't get random noise. Sometimes you do. That's here. Now imagine every question you have is going to be something that is open-ended. You've got to be able to have a conversation with someone without having an influence on them. You'll get that information out accurately. You have to find a way to do that to be able to hit as many aspects of it as you can to establish a structure to it, because it doesn't necessarily have to have a structure when you're engaging it. And it's like you're the one who determines that structure. And so that aspect of it gets more and more difficult. And so the range here, like from the quantitative, qualitative side, one way to look at it is like some of your logic and math over here. On another side over here, it'd be more like abstraction, right? You're taking something as you read it. What is it that you get from it when you pull it? When you pull into it, when you really read into it. Let's see what this says here. I'm going to go through this real fast because there's not really a whole bunch in this outline here for surveys. Here it mentions make items clear, bias term, that kind of stuff. That's all pretty self evident. So when you read that, none of that's going to be too difficult there. We talked a little bit about contingency questions and matrix questions last time. Format that's well. Realize that that design is going to essentially what this is. Design stands in for you. If you're on the qualitative side, instead of you worrying about your design, you're going to worry about okay, what am I doing here? How am I acting? How's my dress? How's my professionalism? How's my response, facial expression? What am I doing here, and how's it affecting this person? Because all of it does. Right? And there's the administration side. Mail and return, cover letters, response rates. Here it mentions response rates. I mentioned that last time. It said something like 50%. You'll never see it. Usually it's like 10%, 20%, something like that. And that's if you're lucky. It's like they're usually really low. So here's where they start getting into interview surveys. And or that over, right? So you can have these where you conduct them in person. But as you're doing that, think about all the ways that you're going to affect that. If it's something that's pretty cut and dry, are you going to have enough time here to build up the relationship with the person? They're actually going to talk to you. Okay, so I'm going to ask, this is a victimization thing. I'm going to ask you a question here that's kind of uncomfortable. It's just going to come off like stereo directions. You have to be real careful not to do that. Here, let's see. What does this say? Help respond to confusing items. So some of the benefits here. You're directly involved. You can observe as well as ask questions. Here it mentions appearance, demeanor, familiarity with questions, probing for responses. All of those are things that require interaction, right? As I'm in front of you, who am I dealing with? Is my appearance going to be something that's going to stop communication, right? If I walk into a police station dressed like I don't know, give me a profession. Doctor. Okay. Medical doctor? Okay. Walked in like a medical doctor. If I go in there and start trying to ask questions of them, what's going to happen to me? I have a long conversation about mental illness, right? Because it's like, why are you walking in a police station going? It's like, can you please share your screen? Yeah, I can. I'm not really, there's not really a whole lot on there that I'm because it's just the outline that I'm kind of talking about as we work through it. Share. Boom. So you'll see right here where it talks about share on the screen. Yes. Familiarity with questions, that kind of thing, probably for response, appearance, demeanor. Yeah. And so you walked into if you're dressed up like a police officer and you walk up to a bunch of prostitutes trying to interview them, they're not going to start talking, right? If you walk up in professional dress, I'm in a suit and tie, to a bunch of street workers, you're still talking prostitutes. It's like, are they going to talk to you? Well, not about research, that kind of a thing. It's like be familiar with that. Here it says try to mirror. Mirroring is a very good way to try to establish what you should be doing. So it's like business setting, dress, business casual, or more professionally, or if you don't, common people dress like a normal person, that kind of those types of things. Familiar with questions helps with dealing with the survey itself, but that's one that's you can practice that. Probing for responses, probing questions in general. Talk more about those. So that's the real benefit of being there in person at any point in time. Is you are there, you are live. If something comes across that doesn't make sense, changes the nature of things, dig in, right? You can get to the qualitative side. They'll actually identify some of those for you. Here are some signs that someone, there's something else going on here. There's a part missing, right? There's a jump in the story. There's a gap here, or a sudden change in emotion, or facial response, or hey, I had a sudden silence here for a second. What's going on there? They're probably thinking about what to say or what actually occurred. If you go and dig into it, what are you thinking about there? Well, what just came from? As you dig into that, you'll get different things. And so this allows for that, but you have to be very, very, very careful because where is it right here? Neutrality, right? Whatever you say is going to color to someone. I mean, if someone's being quiet with their thoughts, they're being quiet with their thoughts for a reason. When you ask them what it is, are you going to offer them an option? You do. How much does that come to affect what they say? Hey, we're just talking about family stuff. What came across your mind? Was it related to X, Y, or Z? Right? You just think related to X? Yes, no. No? It's likely that you still end up talking about that. Just influence there. If you want to do that, that's great. If you don't, it's not. All right. Here it mentions practice. Devise best, most neutral probes, and everybody has the same ones. What does it talk about here? Control. This is less of an issue now. It talks about control here. Because what you're talking about, most of the stuff is online. So it's a system does it, system distributes it. Doesn't really matter who goes in there and clicks the button to tell them to send them out. I think it's all there. But if you're gonna be there in person, yeah, you'll need to make sure you do this kind of stuff. Practice sessions, all that good stuff. Computer assisted in-person interviews are interesting because they can, well, they give you that stuff right there. Basically what that does, if you have computer aided in-person ones, you can use it as a couple of different ways. One can be a reminder for you as you're going through. The other side is there might be some, well, imagine that previous section. Talking about family history. Now I want to talk about family abuses. Is that a topic you really want to talk with them about? How would it be better to talk with them about it? Are you more likely to draw information and stuff about that out? Are you more likely to close it down, right? Because some things, if you start asking, it just closes it down. Instances like that, bring the screen back. Here's your computer in front of you, and drop this. I'm going to be over here for the next few minutes. You just finish that, right? Because there might be instances where it's easier for a person to relate that information there than it is to another person. Here they mention, what is it? Advantages, more productive, speed, yeah. Disadvantages. Doesn't even mention that thing I mentioned. That's the one that actually, it really, really helps with. Telephone surveys. Telephone surveys are not as common. It used to be more common. Once University, every so many years, they do a huge telephone survey area related to attitudes for racism and ethnicity as they pertain to that. And so you can see the level of effort involved with that. Immense. So if you're having a large number of people, even a small number of people to call and actually ask these questions, to realize the time involved, the number of people it's going to take to be able to do so. Right? Conducting different languages, that kind of thing. Disadvantages. Home telephone. No homelessness. 3 methods. I don't really care about that. Strengths in research. When we start talking about survey, reliability, generalizability, validity. Other than that, the rest of it just kind of builds off of that. So here's where we get to move into the qualitative stuff. Okay. So here's where it will help you. Quantitative is more like the logic, the math, fitting things together, right? Quantitative tends to be a little bit of that. Also diving in, right? As you are dealing with that one there. Oh, and there's one question to this part. Same thing. In person online. Yeah. Okay. Let's stop this for just a quick second. Over here. Okay. So there's a few different forms that take place in terms of qualitative work, but basically, anytime you're dealing with it, to some degree, it's extracting information. You could say it's also to some degree like, I don't want to say tagging, but it's almost like that, right? Is do the Facebook stuff? Yeah, no. That's I'll share screen here in a second, but I'll pop that back when we get back into it. It's not the only thing I think of because I don't do the social media stuff. Though. Pictures, tagging people, right? You go through, it's like, oh, here's all the people in the picture. It's kind of the same thing like that, but with words and ideas as you're going through these types of things. there's a few different ways that you can go about it. Some things are like case studies, individual studies of people. Sometimes you'll have things called ethnographies, where I'm studying, a group of people, or maybe it's a specific environment for a period of time. There's a whole bunch of different ways, different approaches. I'm trying to remember if this had a setup for those, to identify those different ones. I don't think it did, the scheme for those. But just realize it's a wide range of venues, wide range of approaches, numbers of uses. But it's one of extraction, one of basically abstraction. So as you deal with these things, there's 3 ways to do, like, you're going to do interviewing as a part of qualitative research. Like we're actually integrating someone. You have to do with let's do with the schedule. When I say schedule, basically it's the same thing as a survey. Your list of questions. Do you have one? And how structured is it? Right? So you basically have structured, semi, or unstructured. Structure. I have a list of questions, same as I do as a survey. Right? When I ask those series of questions, I'm going to give it the same way every time. Responses that are basically open-ended. We'll see where they go. In that kind of a thing, like every single question is present there. It's going to be the same for every single one, right? Unstructured. You have nothing. This is just you relying on your skills. These are the most extreme. Don't, no, this isn't, you won't, how should I put this? Only the most expertise, highest levels of expertise do this kind of stuff. Like that's really hard to do. Because what ends up happening there is if you have no schedule, no list of questions through which you're going, you just have a general idea for the thing that is that you're interested. You're dealing with natural conversations with people, right? That's not an easy thing to deal with. How difficult is it to follow normal conversations with people? Just think about all the different topics that come up with someone in terms of normal speech, right? You're talking with someone in one conversation, how directed that conversation is and how much it meanders, right? How many times do you start a conversation and might go way off topic? Maybe it'll come back, maybe it won't. And so, how well would that serve something when you're trying to extract information across people? It doesn't work very well. You have to have a lot of skill to make sure that you maintain your, I guess, avenue of research would be a way to look at it. Stay in your lane kind of thing. Middle ground right here is your semi-structure. Basically, what you start getting there is it'll have questions that relate to your major topics of interest, some basic framework, but from there, your things like your probes or unexpected questions, or you have opportunity to introduce those. So usually here's the best place to be that good middle ground, because you have that structure in place to make sure that you're going to get to where you're going to go. You've got plenty of opportunity to, yes, be live there in the moment, because this one's more performative if you really think about it, because you have to be there and you have to not have an effect. So yeah, it's performative. Think about it as like the inversion of theater, right? Theater, you always want you to have an effect on it. Here we're trying to do the exact opposite. It's opposite of what it is. Once you get your information, you realize it's a free-flowing conversation. Right? If you track all this stuff, if you do this research, it's highly, highly detailed. You actually end up with more data and information than we end up with on the quantitative side. Numbers make things a little simpler. I can tell you how many something is, it's good or bad. So I'm going to talk about how good or how bad it is. That's going to be a longer conversation. right? And so over here, basically what we end up with is a lot of text. Ideally, what you'll do if you're doing like interviews, board, right? Audio, video, all that stuff, because that gives you, what would you say? More accurate, higher level of resolution data than what you'll be able to take down in that interview. You'll have field notes for taking down notes while you're doing it. But realize that that's not going to be able to capture as much information as what's going on. You're just going to be able to hit highlights. Ideally, what ends up happening is as soon as you had any types of interviews or anything of that nature, immediately upon the time that you are done, you take your notes, you sit down, you have recording, you maybe listen to it a few times too, and you go through and you do a full write-up of what took place. Right? When you do that, then you go through, and this will be the part that reminds me of what you do with lit review stuff, right? Anytime you have a lit review, what you're going to end up doing, I'm going to read a whole bunch of articles, and as I'm reading these lines and lines and lines of text, okay? I'm dealing with these lines right here, text. So this part right here, we're dealing with a prostitute. We've been interviewing prostitutes about the childhood experiences and the processes through which they found themselves moving into this criminal sphere, right? And so maybe this whole paragraph's what they're talking about childhood, right? Here's going to be your earliest, first formative experiences, and I'm going to do a special call out here because what I see in this one is a very unique traumatic event that's taken place or something like that. And so I see something here that's going to have a bearing or an effect on the conversation as it moves forward from there, or on that person that's obvious, something like that. And as I'm going through here and I'm making notes about this, maybe these sections here, basically I'm creating an outline for this thing. Right? Here are the different elements at play that I see in this story. Right? And so you start to get those different elements here. We call those, sometimes they'll call them themes. Right? This is the coding process. Qualitative data. Right? That'd be like akin to open coding is what they call it. Right? I'm just going to go through and read it to see what themes emerge in it. As that happens, this is why they said it's so good on validity, but weak on reliability and generalizability. It's right here. It's right in front of you. If you read it, you can pull out the same messages, right? It would be like reading, in some ways, you're reading the words there, but don't forget to read between the lines, right? And also dive down. It's like anytime that this right here, once owned bias is potential problem here. It's a big one because you were directly involved. At the same time, you were to be acting like the filter for this thing. You guys know how those filters work on search engines. This time it's you. Right? You're the one who's setting up what you're filtering. And so as you do this, and you do this through these interviews, X number of times, you keep pulling off more and more. This is literally extracting out what's going on. That's literally the process of extraction, right? If you go and you look at your textbooks, they do the same thing in table of contents, right? Or those research articles you read, they do that same thing in terms of the overall structure, whether you're talking like introduction, lit review, methodology, or within it itself, right? This paragraph is going to be on this one topic in this one section. Here they're making a statement about it. And so it's literally the same kind of processes there. So you start to get it a little bit on the writing side and in terms of reading and writing, but it's an abstraction element, the ability to do it with purpose and without bias. That's really hard. Here it's going to talk a little bit about, let's see, share screen since I'm looking back at it again. Boom, boom, here. Here it talks about multiple meanings and constructions of reality. I should probably talk about that. Multiple meanings. So that's that diving in thing I mentioned before. Here, I think they use the phrase horizons of meanings. Another way to look at it is saturation. Saturation is what I kind of like the different kind of concept, the same kind of thing. As you're reading these types of things and interviewing these people, after a certain point in time, it doesn't matter who you interview or what you're talking about related to that subject, you've got all the information that is available, right? You've got there's nothing new that's coming across at that point in time. You've hit that I call it the horizons of meanings, that point at which you've basically hit the limits of where that research is going to go. As you're dealing with that horizons, there are multiple. There's going to be many, many things underlying. So it's sort of like inferred meanings, underlying meanings. So in terms of things you need to track, okay, what's being said directly? Potential inferred meanings, purposefully inferred meanings, misstatements, both purposeful and not, ways in which people lie to themselves. That's really a good one, right? Because you'll see that one a little harder to catch sometimes, but once you start catching it, you'll see it as a pattern. And so it's like, okay, is this something that they're lying to me about, or is it something they're lying to themselves about? Right? Or it's some conflict in what they've just said. You just said something directly conflicted with what you just said. Okay, I'm going to key in on that for a second, and maybe I might ask a probing question. That'd probably be ideal to get them to clarify it. Or maybe they can't clarify it. Right? But there's all of those levels, all those potential interpretations for any one sentence, finding the ones that are accurate, also finding the threads across them that might not be as prevalent, but also just as applicable, right? Like, I don't want to give that an example. Okay. Constructions about reality. I don't know if I really want to get into that part about, basically start getting philosophy again. Okay. Focus groups, interviewing, disadvantages. I already talked about that one a little bit. Down here, here's where it starts talking about topics. Yeah. Oh, so right here. Can be thought as a purposeful conversation, deliberately planned, but inherently flexible. That's the good thing about this qualitative research. Is one, it doesn't take a whole lot of people. Technically, it creates more knowledge, more data, and well, it's if you're going to do grounded theories and that kind of thing, this stuff's involved with that. We get into topics. Remember, you're dealing with quality, not about numbers here necessarily. It's about quality. So here mentions like labels by society, understanding, right? It's that understanding you're trying to get at here. People's roles, identities, scenes, how they operate, right? If I said Elijah Anderson, does that name ring a bell to anybody? A little bit. Okay, so if I said street culture, you probably heard that in a few places, right? Elijah Anderson is, what was it? Street Code, Code of the Streets. That's his book. 90s, if I remember correctly. That was based off of ethnography. I'd have to go back and look at that. Going into those areas, those inner city areas, meeting with them, trying to establish with them how things work, how they were interacting with one another, right? It's when it starts getting into people's roles, their values, and some of the aspects of street cultures, one's own needs, wants versus others. That street code is I'll put my wants above other people's needs in some instances. And so he's getting that from being in there and dealing with them, to talking with them. Yeah. So ways that you can interview people, ways that you can get this information, numbers of different ways. Interviewing is probably the easiest. You're dealing with someone one-on-one. Here then it mentions focus groups. Focus groups are very useful. Realize that what you're dealing with there. You're going to have a group of people who are going to be competing for time and attention. Some don't want it. Some want nothing but it, right? And so you're going to have to manage that while you're in it. you're going to have to deal with, let's see, that's probably the biggest one. You know, the people who talk too much should be quiet, and the people who talk too little start speaking up. That's usually the biggest group dynamic, to still have some voices that are louder than others. You also have the influence of some voices versus others, because some people will, you know, their opinions will directly influence others in groups, and kind of those types of things. Two big groups to keep in mind: natural versus artificial. Natural, that's one that's just naturally occurring. Artificial is one you made, right? An example of a natural focus group. I'm interested in interviewing about 5 students for a focus group on, say it's school mascots or something. I don't know. I'm just going to walk over to the UC and look to see if I can find 5 people just kind of grouped together. It's natural. Right? Artificial would be okay. We're getting interested in this topic of research study. We'll say it's what's the problem? Give me a social problem or a crime or something.
Robbery.
Okay, so we're dealing with robbery, right? Now, I can deal with that a number of different ways, but I'm going to put together a group of people. So I'm going to want to get a couple law enforcement officials, particularly someone who's got a good history in dealing with property crimes. I'm going to get at least one political person, because they're going to be the ones that's going to be involved with like the public side of things in terms of the not police but governmental actions. I'm going to want some citizenry in here, so that way they've got their opportunity to send. Ooh, and if I'm really good, maybe I'll want to get an old but reformed burglar / robber to come in and be a part of it too, to help guide them. That's completely artificial. I put those people together, right? Very useful sometimes, but also realize that that's some way. I don't want to necessarily use the term bias, but that's something you did, right? Here's what I talk about what you're looking for in terms of qualitative. It says richness, meaning, shared cultural views, that kind of thing. Probably the biggest thing to talk about, I mentioned horizons of meanings that you're trying to find understandings. They're related to that, but deeper underlying meanings at times. Richness or depth, sometimes thickness are all terms that they'll bring into this to talk about how thorough you went into it, the level you went into it. So what they're basically trying to say is that it's you know, your understanding is thick, that this rich, or basically otherwise that you fully or sufficiently delve into those waters. Another way of looking at it. All right. When it starts dealing with this is one of the reasons why I sometimes don't like qualitative stuff. That whole perspective thing. Here it says, critical realist perspective, 2 parts to understanding. Your stance about the nature of reality. Critical realists believe that reality does exist, which offers a firmer, less complicated platform to begin research. And then it says, critical realists believe that interpretation of the world or constructions derived from a perspective, right? And so when they were talking about, it was the learning objectives where they mentioned, what was it, constructions, that kind of thing. That has to do with how one would use life overall. Those are the more, I don't want to say lofty or flighty, but those 2 words that come to mind. You start talking about those overarching terms about perspective that one takes in terms of research, whether you're talking about critical realist or structural functionalists, that kind of stuff. Basically, what they're trying to identify is how they look at the world itself. This would be like, actually, I think I have that in my computer somewhere. I should probably share it with you all. Basically, things like if you're a structural functionalist, you know, there's a structure to the world that is built based upon function or something of that nature. Whereas if you're a postmodernist, you question the nature of reality itself, and you know, stuff like that. There's a bunch of stances on that will affect how you conduct this research, depending on how that topic you're interested in fits into those overall schemes. Right? That's not going to be necessarily immediately obvious right off the bat, but that'd be something that you'd figure out as you were developing it. All right. Nature of reality, distinct in two ways. Real world exists beyond our perception and constructions. It mentions radical constructivist thinks that reality is construction based on what we receive it to be, right? So how much of it is that it's real? How much of it is that I see it, right? And so that's kind of one of those underlying issues with well, all research. It's philosophical in nature. Yeah. Here's what I talk about: substantive frame. That's where that language comes in. Breadth, density of the material we want to connect. Ideally, you want thickness. You want thick description. Interviews, we already talked about semi-structured, unstructured, focus groups. Here, I actually give you some size. Started 1950s with market research. There's where it talks about groups there. Okay, now here's where it actually gets into the structure of it. This is actually a pretty good part. Okay. So when you think about conversations with people, what kind of conversations do you guys have with people? They do anything? Go anywhere? Yes, no? I just kind of interact with people, make some noise, and just kind of go about your day. Is that? I mean, that's what I do most of the time. Half the time, I'm not using words whenever I'm not here. You know, something like that. It's usually a warning. That person's gonna fall, or something like that. Go grab that. You know, something like that. They go somewhere. It's just they take their time going somewhere, like people. It's that thing you guys do in the summertime. Real nice out. Just kind of lay around and get taken somewhere.
You mean like you're going on the river?
Yeah. Floating on the river. Okay. I'm gonna make a joke now. I can't. Have you ever watched Stephen King's It or read the book? Does it float? Sorry, I had to do that. No, so that's actually the reason why I mentioned that is because conversations are much like that, right? They do tend to be like water. The two schemes I think they're given here are related to rivers, right? Or no, one's related to a river, one's related to a tree. Conversations flow. The what does it say? River and branch and tree, and the river one was actually the one that's more fun. So you think of a river that meanders every now and again, it'll circle back around, right? Keep going in that original direction, but it might meander off and come back. Right? You can have come back, circle back around. Any number of things. Rivers do this all the time. Conversations do this all the time. Tree branch is a little bit more structured, so you'll start out in one direction and branch on in different ways, right? And so that kind of gives you the two ideas for how conversations flow, kind of in general, right? Is this something that's a bit more, I guess, regulated, structured to some degree, a bit more directed is really what it is. You get over here with this, right? As I'm going through these directions, they all have a particular aim and they all move me down this direction. Well, the river setup does not have that, right? That's where it's a bit more free flowing, a bit more like natural conversation. Also extremely dangerous because as you're spending those times off topic, you're spending time on topic, there's going to be deprivations you're giving yourself later on to some degree. Deprive yourself at that time to get that information from that person because you got information that's off topic. May be extremely useful, maybe stuff that ends up reframing everything that you get from it. Right? So, as you do that, diachronic and synchronic. Basically, what that means is, are we doing this in terms of time order or not? Diachronic has time, right? So that would be something like, okay, if I'm dealing with an interview prostitute about how they ended up over here, I'm going to start at the beginning, right? Maybe I start at childhood. Maybe I start at as early as memories can be. Maybe I don't. Maybe I just start about, okay, so what kinds of things start setting on your path? What were say some major points in your life before you got to this work? And we start picking up there, right? And then you follow it in time order so you can see how it develops. Here you don't necessarily deal with it that way. This one's more topical, right? As it's topical. You can put time to it, but this is the one that has time to it. Cool. Let's see. Here. Mentions about approaches related to questions, main questions, those types of things. As you're trying to get into this type of research, realize that usually you're dealing with sensitive topics or at least complex ones. So you have to spend some time building into it. So those types of topics won't be things that you ask right off the bat. Right? There's a whole process, sort of like early in the semester, we're talking about, if you're going to conduct research, there's that process for, you find a sponsor, you go and you get integrated into whatever organization has the data that you need. It's the same thing here, but this when you're doing it at the individual level, I'm actually getting to know you. I have to build rapport with you so that way you can have the trust in me to give me the information I need, right? Or the information that I'm trying to get. Yeah, it says don't overload them emotionally, begin with. And so the rest of this is just kind of ideas on how to handle it. Like if you got probes, how easy is a probe? How easy is it to get more information for someone? Right? I ask questions in here. Sometimes they're rhetorical, sometimes they're not. If they're not rhetorical, what do? I sit and I wait. Right? I don't have to add any more. Sometimes I have fun with it. Someone says something like, just continue, right? You can get more information from someone just from just waiting and doing something like that. Are you leaning in, showing them that you're interested in the conversation? It's something where I move back, right? Yeah. Continuation, clarification, follow-up questions that mentions after that. And so you can draw someone in, you can get more information, and that one's one that the more hands-off you are, usually the better it is. They just kind of naturally flow. Here's where it starts talking about gaining access and that kind of thing. And it's going to be the same kind of process. I think it mentions this earlier. If not, this is a really good one. This is one that I think is most research, right? I guess to establish what you are. Are you integrated with this or not? Is it something where you have some type of inlet or not? Sponsorships is what you start talking about there. Is there someone who's associated with this group that you know? That's an active inlet, right? That's an active doorway to it. From there, here's what it mentions. It's a formal organization. You go through the formal process, right? What you would do is you find that sponsor, have them make communication, email, then call over to schedule a meeting, that kind of thing. And you probably wouldn't call that person in particular, but probably someone one or two rows below them, so that way it gets transferred up and they realize that, right? And so those are all approaches that have to be built, just like you were dealing with the person that you're actually interviewing, because all of these relationships matter. So that sensitivity to you, to who you are, and your effect on the world becomes ever more sensitive. All right. With that, we'll pick up with informal organizations and subcultures and that kind of thing. I'll get you all on Monday. Be expecting an email from me in the next couple of days. Hopefully it'll only take me one or two. Or a week. Good God. It's crazy. And that's our alarm. So I will catch you all next time. With that, have a great day. And if you need anything, let me know. Bye.